What if one man's death could leave behind a mystery, while his life's work helped shape an entire nation? In 1966, India's greatest nuclear scientist boarded a flight over the French Alps. Minutes later, the aircraft crashed into Mont Blanc. Homi Jehangir Bhabha was dead. But Bhabha was more than a scientist. He had helped build India's nuclear program from the ground up. He created institutions, inspired generations of scientists, and dreamed of making India a global scientific power. And after his mysterious death, questions about the crash would refuse to disappear. This is the story of Homi J. Bhabha, the man who helped build India's atomic future. World War II had changed Bhabha's plans, but what looked like a setback became an opportunity. Bhabha joined the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, where he began working with Nobel Prize-winning physicist C.V. Raman. Here, he continued his research into cosmic rays and high-energy particles. His reputation was growing rapidly. In theoretical physics, Bhabha made an important contribution to understanding the interaction between electrons and positrons. The phenomenon became known as Bhabha scattering. It was a major achievement. But Bhabha was thinking beyond equations. He was looking at India itself. At the time, India had brilliant individuals, but very little infrastructure for advanced scientific research. Bhabha believed that had to change. In 1944, he wrote to industrialist J.R.D. Tata with an ambitious proposal. India needed an institute where scientists could conduct fundamental research at the highest international level. That vision became reality in 1945 with the creation of the Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, or TIFR. Bhabha had built more than a laboratory. He had created a place where Indian scientists could dream bigger. And when India became independent in 1947, Bhabha was ready for an even greater challenge. India was now independent, but Bhabha believed political freedom was only the beginning. A modern nation also needed scientific strength, and one technology had captured his attention more than any other: atomic energy. The world had entered the nuclear age. But Bhabha saw nuclear science differently. He believed India should develop atomic energy for peaceful purposes, especially electricity, research, medicine, and national development. In 1948, India's Atomic Energy Commission was established. Bhabha became its first chairman. He now had the responsibility to turn an ambitious scientific vision into reality. He worked directly with Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, who strongly supported the development of Indian science. Together, they backed a long-term program designed to make India scientifically self-reliant. Bhabha pushed for research facilities, reactors, laboratories, and trained scientists. His vision eventually led to the creation of the Atomic Energy Establishment, Trombay. It became a major center of India's nuclear research. But Bhabha understood that technology alone was not enough. India needed people capable of mastering it, so he invested heavily in education, research, and scientific training. He wanted Indian scientists to work at the highest international level without having to leave India. The foundations of India's nuclear program were taking shape, and Bhabha was at the center of it all. By the 1950s, Homi Bhabha had become one of India's most influential scientists. But there was something unusual about him. He was not interested in science alone. Bhabha loved art, classical music, architecture, and painting. He believed scientific institutions should not feel like cold laboratories. They should inspire people. That philosophy could be seen in the institutions he helped create. He wanted scientists surrounded by beauty, creativity, and intellectual freedom. At the same time, his nuclear program was expanding. India began developing research reactors and strengthening its expertise in atomic science. Bhabha also became an important international figure. He represented India at major conferences and argued that developing nations should have access to peaceful nuclear technology. He believed science could transform countries that had been held back by poverty and colonialism. But the world around him was becoming increasingly dangerous. The Cold War was dividing the planet. Nuclear weapons were spreading, the space race had begun, and the world's major powers were competing for technological superiority. India wanted to remain independent of those power blocks. Bhabha's answer was scientific self-reliance. He wanted India to develop the knowledge and infrastructure it needed on its own. By the early 1960s, his dream was no longer just a vision. India had become a serious participant in nuclear research. Then, in January 1966, everything changed. January 24, 1966. Homi Bhabha boarded Air India Flight 101. The Boeing 707 was flying from Bombay toward Geneva. Bhabha was traveling to Europe for an international meeting. The aircraft approached the French Alps. Ahead stood Mont Blanc. Then, the flight disappeared. The aircraft crashed into the mountain. All 117 people aboard were killed. India had lost one of its most important scientists. Bhabha was only 56 years old. The official investigation attributed the crash to navigation errors. But his sudden death created questions that would continue for decades. Why did the aircraft crash? What exactly happened during those final moments? And could the disaster have been prevented? Because Bhabha was not an ordinary passenger. He was the architect of India's atomic energy program. He had helped build TIFR. He had shaped India's nuclear research, and he had become one of the country's most influential scientific figures. That was enough to create speculation. Some theories later suggested that foreign intelligence agencies may have wanted to stop India's nuclear ambitions. But no conclusive evidence has established that the crash was anything other than an accident. The mystery survives mainly because Bhabha's death came at such a critical moment. India had lost the man who had helped design its scientific future. But his work would continue without him. Homi Bhabha was gone. But the scientific institutions he created continued to grow. The atomic energy establishment at Trombay became the Bhabha Atomic Research Center, carrying his name into the future. TIFR developed into one of India's leading centers for advanced scientific research. The nuclear program he helped establish continued expanding. Bhabha had always believed that India could build world-class science within its own borders. And after his death, that belief became reality. His contributions to theoretical physics remained part of international science. His work on cosmic rays and Bhabha scattering became part of the history of modern physics. But perhaps his greatest achievement was not a discovery. It was his ability to build. He built institutions. He trained scientists. He persuaded leaders to invest in research. And he gave independent India something it desperately needed: a scientific vision for the future. The mystery surrounding his final flight may never completely disappear, but the impact of his life is far easier to see. From fundamental physics to nuclear research to generations of Indian scientists. Bhabha's influence continues. He died in the mountains of France. But the scientific future he imagined for India survived. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to Everything Interesting World for more incredible true stories, hidden history, science, mysteries, and the people who changed the world. Because sometimes, a person's greatest legacy is what continues after they are gone.